wrote this one. I'm pretty sure this one may actually expand a bit further, depending on how things go with it. I don't want to make another huge segment to the stream though. So here we go. This is Master Mode QED concern. Now, I didn't actually grab the snippet because I'll probably look at grabbing it after this, depending on how I feel. Because CIG did release some information about master modes and QED, which I thought was interesting. But I want to read this out first, and then, because I didn't read it all the way, and then go back to that post. A correction to the video if it makes sense to. Alright. So this is by Gremlin Queen, Master Mode QED concern. In the most recent Star Citizen Live, it was stated that QED, quantum enforcement devices, will be a standard control mode ability. Playing the Master Modes testbed in the PTU makes me concerned about this. With the current Master Modes model, you can boost from 250-ish to about 500 in about a second and keep that speed up for about a minute depending on if they put power to engines for quicker boost. In a QED scenario, if a ship were to boost, they would have a massive leap on the QED ship. While we only have access to the Gladius, it's not hard to imagine this in a pirate scenario. A Cuddy Blue has to be within 2 kilometers of a target to keep them entrapped. At the moment that a large ship boosts away, they'll be more than far enough to go into travel mode. I believe they mean nav mode. Once the larger ship is to go into nav mode, they will get the full range of their speed and be able to gain even more distance on things on something like a Cuddy Blue and escape. The Cuddy Blue won't be able to catch up on the large ships. Won't be able to catch up once the large ships get into nav mode, since the QED requires a QED ship to stay in SCM mode, standard control mode, to keep the QED up. I think this is a different person, Silent. So you got both sides of the fence that complain about, you know, piracy in different veins. So those who say it's too easy and those who are saying that it's going to be too hard. Putting QED ships into this position will kill the Cuddy Blue, making it worthless. The Mantis will be able to keep up with ships as it has a 10-kilometer range that ships have to escape. Once again, I'll talk about that afterwards. When another ship boosts, the Mantis can catch up with them. For starters, the Mantis does not have a 10-kilometer range for anything. It's got a 20-kilometer radius, or it has a snare that has a 20-kilometer radius bubble, which can only be used in areas where there's no green zone within 30 kilometers of it. So, yeah. The large ships will be able to boost like the Gladius. Unfortunately, we don't know. Like, we genuinely don't know. That's a problem for all of us. The cargo ship can boost to 500. Why can I also not boost to 500? Well, it comes down to who gets the boost first, and if you don't get the merge on them fast enough. This person is under the assumption that somebody's going to be able to switch to nav mode pretty early on. I'll actually talk about that in a little bit. Alright, this is a suggestion that we're moving into now. A good counter to this would be to either lower the boost speed or allow QED ships to use their QED in nav mode. I'm much more partial for the latter, as a ship in nav mode has no weapons or shields. This would incentivize ships being pirated to fight back and destroy the QED ship, as it is the weaker target. This gives the cargo hauling ship a chance to either fight or negotiate for their freedom, as long as still being to maneuver away from the QED field if they can fly well enough. Lowering the boost speed or how fast it takes to get up to max boost would also be a good option. It also makes it so most people can't just run from PvP scenarios at all though, and we need at least some way to get some breathing room from a fight or to escape it. No matter the change, I think QED being within SCM is just a horrible nerf to piracy. It boxes us into a certain ship and gives us way too much. It still gives way too much of a bonus to cargo. Yeah, pretty much. So this is the major concern across most piracy groups, is that I'm going to switch over to Facecam Live. I will find that Star Citizen Live thing while I'm doing that. The concern that a lot of piracy groups have is that the QED ships are going to be made redundant purely because the transition into nav mode is something that allows us to be able to accelerate over the maximum SCM speeds. Now the problem with that I actually started working on a script for a video, and the reason why I started working on it should be this one. The reason why I started working on it is because CIG actually answers it. I'm going to link. Let's see if I can get the timestamp. I'm pretty sure we're at it here. But there's actually some notes that I want to bring up here. Back to the topic though. I hope this is the right. I'm pretty sure this is the right time. Actually, pretty sure I made a note of it. I did make a note of it. Alright, I can actually give you guys a timestamp. Excellent. Copy URL at the time. I'm going to drop this here for you all. So this is last week's Star Citizen Live where we're talking about master modes. I'm turning the music off. We're going back over here to the reaction scene. This only goes for a couple of minutes. It's just over 3 minutes. Now this will go for.
How will QED work with master modes?
So the for both like aspects of this, there's the player who's firing the QED or using the QED.
Hey, Mordors.
There's the player who's going to be on the other end of it, essentially being pulled out or dampened. So for the person who's using it, the idea is it's going to be, or the current idea anyway, will be in SCM mode along with a bunch of other things, so that you're in SCM, you've got the QED active, and then that's when you can use it. And along with lots of the other, like the combat stuff is all in SCM.
That's the 320.
So you can still do all the same, everything else, you have the dampener, you have the snare, everything works the same way from that end. And then on the other side, the person who's being pulled out or dampened, the current working plan will be that when you get pulled out, essentially the quantum drive will be disabled or restricted somehow, because a lot of the internals of master modes doesn't necessarily care about which mode you're actually in directly. It's if your quantum drive is active. That's quantum.
Well, this is an interesting point that I actually want to quickly highlight here. Master modes doesn't care about your quantum drive, in the sense that when you switch to nav mode, your quantum drive starts spooling up. And this was an interesting point that they were bringing up, is that when you come in range of quantum enforcement, something happens to your QED. And I think the point that they're making there, Mordors, that they haven't decided on is if it just stops you from being able to jump, or if it actually disables your quantum drive. Because right now, it just stops you from being able to jump. You can still spool up your quantum drive, you can still calibrate with a destination, and as soon as you get out of range, you can jump. Which is something that I've always had an issue with. But if they make it so that it's disabled, then it turns it off completely. And here's the interesting part is that for nav mode, you switch to nav mode, your shields and weapons go down, and your ship is able to go faster above the SCM speeds. But your quantum drive is actually an influencing factor on that. And this is why they talk about your quantum drive is disrupted somehow and your ship drops back into SCM speeds, but it doesn't go back into SCM mode. I don't think they actually said that yet. I think they say it in about a minute.
What quite a lot of the things are. So for example, if you're in nav mode, but you've turned your quantum drive off for some reason, or it's been blown off or damaged or distorted or whatever else, you will still lose, you won't have access to those top speeds because the quantum drive's off. So that's what the restriction is. So if you're in nav mode and you get quantum dampened or quantum snared, your quantum drive is going to be off and you're going to be limited to SCM speeds for that time period. And then you can swap back to SCM mode yourself and then go try and defend yourself. That's the current plan. We still need to test all these kinds of PU specific things because there's open questions about things like...
I'm going to pause there because they bring up some examples which actually is a bit of an issue. Like I actually reacted to this on my Friday stream because I ended up watching this. But I ended up watching this live when it was happening. And it motivated me to start working on a script for a video to put up on YouTube. And I've watched this quite a few times now. And my concern that's come out of this now, and my initial concern was a lot stronger, but as I've watched over it more, it's kind of like sunk it in a bit better. And it seems like CIG is going with this systemic approach again with how QED affects quantum drives. So, more than likely, I'm going to make a bold prediction here that for now, it's only going to work against the quantum drive, regardless of the mode that you're in. What's more than likely going to happen, though, is that they will tie the quantum drive to nav mode, because there is no reason to go into nav mode if you can't access those higher speeds. So if the quantum drive is the reason why you can access speeds over SCM speed, then that's your motivation for going into it. Well, if your quantum drive is disrupted and you can't go over those speeds, why would you go into nav mode? So my bold prediction here is that when a ship, like CIG will come around to this conclusion eventually, but when a ship encounters a quantum enforcement device, they will go from nav mode back to SCM. And once they go back to SCM, they won't be able to get out of it. Yeah, except nav mode also allows you to, well, when you go into nav mode, because it's supposed to be, your ship is supposed to accelerate faster, but he literally just said that your quantum drive is actually the device on your ship that allows you to go 2 speeds over SCM. So for the sake of simplicity, and the bold prediction that I'm making here is based on this data, they will just go, all right, you encounter a QED. If you're in nav mode, we just drop you out of nav mode, because the device, the reason why you'd be going into nav mode is no longer functional. Like, people aren't going to try and engage nav mode afterwards, after they get dampened. It also makes it easier for CIG for their checks, because it's like, are we in nav mode, yes or no? If yes, switch to SCM. Are we in SCM mode? Yes. Don't allow nav mode switch. Myself personally, I think they should do something along the lines of where you can do it if you want. Well, this is where the thought experiment gets easier, and it's why I said it's my bold prediction that CIG will do this, but it's based purely on the data that we have. The hopeful projection that I have, I'll play this particular part first, and then I'll talk a little bit more, because there's a point that he makes, and he's using a very specific example, which at the surface level, you think that they're being very narrow-minded, but it ends up just being an example. But let's finish this off. They only talk about this for 3 minutes, and we're already like a minute and a half in.
In a pirate versus cargo hauler situation with QED, for example, what kind of, like, how often should the pirate be successful versus how often should the cargo hauler escape? Because historically we've gone back and forth in balance a lot of the time, where the cargo hauler is always able to escape, so the pirate can't really do much, or the other way around, and the pirate's always able to catch the cargo hauler. So we want some middle ground between that, and we're still working to get the exact balance of where everything fits.
And then I have to imagine stuff like the upcoming resource management system throws that all into array too.
So this is an interesting point here. I want you guys to remember what Jared ends up talking about here, because the next points that I bring up kind of, I don't know, once I listened to this enough, it gave me a bit of copium, or a huge hit of hopium.
Because there's the default balancing, but then there's what the tuner does, what the mechanic does to increase those chances on either side. And stuff, and how those combine. It's like this person, the attacker has upgraded their ability to QED, but the cargo person has upgraded their ability to resist, and you got rock versus rock here in the thing. So it's a unique challenge, and I'm excited to see it play out as the work of the EUPU feature team comes to completion, and then it gets handed over to folks of the gameplay team. So yeah, I brought that back.
All right, that's pretty much the entire segment on QED that CIG talks about. Now, the reason why I stopped just before the example and then let the example play out and then continued, identified Jared's little point towards the end. The upgrades to QED or escape is interesting. Now, right now with the way that QED works, it's either you're in the bubble or you're not. And the counter gameplay to QED comes down to your flight skills. There are methods, there are maneuvers that you can use and strategies that you can use depending on the location that you're at to be able to evade a dampener. Doing it against a snare is a lot more difficult, but if the pirate that you're dealing with that's in a mantis using a snare is not experienced enough, you can leverage skill to overcome their snare, which a lot of people don't realize. And you don't have to destroy the mantis in order to achieve that. You don't even need to engage it, you just need to get clear of the mantis. So, but the particular scenario that we're in is that a lot of players don't know how to deal with QED. The way that the AI engage players using QED is the AI doesn't really chase the player. It just kind of sits there. So by default, players are taught, because the majority of the encounters that they have with QED are from AI, they're just taught, fly in a straight line, get out of the bubble, and then you'll be able to jump eventually. When they encounter a player, the QED follows them. And there's a problem with that, in that they don't know what they can do in order to overcome it. And it's only those who really have trained in QED or have dealt with it a lot that know how to overcome QED, the dampening and that. Now, with what Jared was talking about there, with the whole ability to be able, the whole ability of making upgrades, upgrading, a component to improve your, the QED's efficiency and, upgrading the ability to counter it essentially. That discussion there creates this condition with the current iteration of what we have with QED, in that it follows a similar vein as what Evil Line does with, its, can't remember the interdictor terms, like webifiers, scramblers. They have interdiction bubbles now. There's a fourth one, actually. I've got notes. I've been making notes on this stuff. What is it? Warp Disruptor, Warp Scrambler, Interdiction Sphere Launcher, and Warp Disruption Field Generators. Those are all mainly passive stuff. You are able to target the ship and utilize those components there to prevent somebody from running away from you. And that's kind of what we've got now with QED. You turn it on, you get in range, and as long as you stay in range of that person, they can't get away. They have to physically move their ship and perform maneuvers or destroy your ship in order to be able to get away. There used to be a cooldown on QED. Eventually CIG got rid of it for whatever reason. I'm pretty sure it actually had to do with pursuits going for, you know, close to 20 minutes to half an hour because of the speeds that people can achieve. But we're in this position where the current QED mechanics, they're very passive. The active part is you flying your ship. Now, from a systemic gameplay design, quantum snaring somebody is just ripping them out of quantum travel. After that, the snare acts as like a giant dampener, right? So with the Master Modes update, they would end up pulling somebody out of quantum travel and then just act like a giant dampener where their, you know, where their quantum drive is disrupted in some way, shape or form, and it slows the ship right down, or the target ship right down. Now, with that in mind, the quantum dampener is really the gameplay mode when it comes to QED gameplay, so enforcement and resistance to QED, that matters the most. We could end up in a position where we end up with something like what is it? Elite Dangerous's system for FSD interdiction, so their frame shift drive interdiction mechanics, where you're able to tether onto a target using a FSD interdictor. You then play a minigame as the pirate, where you're trying to keep your reticle on the target until the bloody the bar reaches 100%. Meanwhile, the person who's been interdicted is trying to hit an escape vector, and they're trying to hit it for long enough so that they can actually get away. So for me, with what CIG is doing, is that they have the opportunity to expand quantum QED, so quantum enforcement gameplay, where they could kind of make it similar to the way that Elite Dangerous's FSD interdiction game mechanics work. In that, in order to be able to maintain a dampening on a target, or to keep a target from being able to jump into nav mode to escape you, you have to, for whatever reason, do more than just keep the ship within range of you. Honestly, you know, from my perspective, it's going to be better for the pilot, for the person who's resisting QED, to be able to do something that allows them to be able to escape, but requires skill to be able to do it. Which is why Elite Dangerous's FSD interdiction mechanics, I think, is something that CIG may look at doing something similar to. And incorporate, like, I know Elite Dangerous does this, where you've got different FSD interdictor modules that you can attach to your ship that give you either better range or a stronger pull or range of, arc of influence. And then there's also modules that you can add to your ship that makes it easier for you to be able to resist FSD, or, you know, improve your chances of resisting when you are being interdicted. Yes, Silence, there will be a YouTube video about this. So what we've got here for QED is the opportunity to add a level of complexity to quantum dampening gameplay, that improves the opportunity for the target to be able to resist and escape through gameplay mechanics that are more intuitive than what we've got now. Because right now it's just, oh, I'm being dampened, I can't jump away, I'll fly around, the thing that's got the dampener on, I'll just shoot at that and blow it up. It's not really working out because this thing can outmaneuver me. I don't have any turret gunners with me, can't really run away because I'm stuck in SEM. Well, if CIG wants counter gameplay to happen, they are going to have to introduce systems to resisting QED that are more than just passive systems. Like myself personally, my initial thoughts when Jared was talking about, you know, adding modules that, you know, improves enforcement or resistance or to that effect, immediately got my hackles up, because I'm just sitting there going, no, they can't add something passive that just makes it harder for us to be able to, you know, interdict someone. Like, there needs to be a skill-based element. If you don't maintain the skill-based element, you're just dumbing down the mechanics because people are too lazy to fucking try. And you're going against the principles of what your game is supposed to be about. Right? So from that perspective, CIG would need to add another layer of complexity to quantum dampening, to make it so that if you want to prevent a target from escaping you, you not only have to turn on your dampener, but when you're in range of a target, you've got to do an extra task that requires you being skilled in flight. And what that does is it requires you to move closer to the target, potentially putting you in range of their turret gunners. And this gives haulers a reason why they should bring turret gunners, because if pirates are showing up, well, you know, pirates in this example, but it could be even bounty hunters, and why, you know, criminals should be, you know, operating in groups as opposed to solo. The requirement that a QED enabled ship has to close with your target and stay within range of it gives the turret gunners an opportunity to engage that target as well. Meanwhile, the pilot can be controlling their ship, making maneuvers, whether or not it's to go on a, you know, trying to achieve an escape vector or something like that, or, you know, like trying to exploit weak spots, you know, like maybe QED enforcement or quantum dampening, you know, has strong areas in the bubble and weak areas in the bubble. So if that ends up being the case, then maybe it comes down to the pilot trying to find those weaker areas and exploit that. Who knows? CIG could, you know, literally do anything with it, really. It will end up being passive RNG knowing CIG. Oh man, I'll be fucking so angry if it ends up being passive random number generation. I'll be so fucking angry. So angry! You know, that's the last thing that we want. And that, to me, you know, it's one of the motivations why I'm working on a video to talk about this QED topic and to suggest to CIG to pursue, you know, the more skill-based approach. Talk about, you know, the opportunities here, because something that you can't do in Elite Dangerous, like when you're in FSD, is you can't really engage in combat. You have to get out of FSD, or sorry, when you're in Super Cruise, which you engage in by using your frame shift drive, when you're in Super Cruise, you can't really engage in combat. So when you get interdicted, you get dropped out of Super Cruise, and that's where all the combat happens. Well, in this case, if you get snared out of quantum travel, you're now at SCM speeds. Well, you can get into combat mode, you can fire back, you can engage in the fight. Not everybody's going to want to be able to fight, and to make it so that it's somewhat fair, or to give people a better chance at surviving the encounter, I think it's going to be important that CIG introduces mechanics that allows a more active approach to being able to overcome QED beyond combat. Which is why, like, the escape vector component of frame shift drive interdiction from Elite Dangerous may actually be something worth introducing here. Because it gives the player who is being targeted by the quantum enforcement device the opportunity, if they're being dampened, to be able to escape. Or exploit, you know, a weakness in the device so that they can get back into nav mode, or do something where if they time it right, they can, I wouldn't say burn out the QED, but force the QED into a position where it overheats. And that it may be something as simple as that. You know, you just got to survive long enough against the QED that it overheats. Pirates will overcome that by just bringing enough firepower to drop your ship. Bounty hunters will be restricted if the target's supposed to be brought in alive. But if it's not, then they'll just blow you up anyway. Yeah, we can dream. I'd still like to put the suggestion forth to CIG about this though. I think it makes it more engaging gameplay. I've always been a big proponent for, like, if we're going to... I've always been a big proponent for empowering players. So if we're going to put players in a position where they can be restricted, then we need to empower them so that they can overcome that restriction. What is going on with these ads? These ads are just crazy. They're just happening whenever the fuck they want now. Told me that I wasn't going to have ads for another 5 minutes. Anyway. So that's where we're at with the QED. What are you guys' thoughts? No, it's based on silence. It's actually based on pre-roll. So it's based on how long my stream has been set, because they're set to specific time frames. But it seems like it's just ignoring it now. Maybe it's because of the first set of ads that I showed off was at a specific time. I don't know. Yeah, what's your guys' thoughts on the QED stuff? No thoughts on it, because who knows how it will be when it's released in 3 years, yeah. Maybe the better question to ask is, like, how would you like to see what would you like to see QED do, or what's the direction that you want to see QED go in? Because myself personally, the direction that I want to see QED go in is something that can be a bit more challenging. Like merging with the target and then sticking to it can be a bit challenging, especially in atmosphere. But, you know, the current problem that we've got is that part of the challenge from, you know, QED and maintaining the dampener on the target is that we're always in this position where it should stay within range. Lion Wombat, thank you for the follow. Countermeasure fights QED? I don't know. Maybe. Like, countermeasures can affect QED from the perspective of it can disrupt targeting to the point where if you do it right, the pilot of the QED ship may get confused where you're at, and you may be able to get out of range of the dampener. If you're dealing with a dampener, it's easy to get out of range. A bit more difficult with a snare. But if you can get out of range of the snare, you know, like, or the dampener, you could still jump away. And that's something that I don't think a lot of players have experience with. Needs to be a countermeasure for the QED. Yes. That's kind of what we're talking about, but it can't be something as simple as, like, the countermeasure stops the QED from working. Because that's a problem to me. Like, it can't be something as simple as, you know, a passive countermeasure where it's like, yeah, you can't QED me because I got this module equipped. So I'd just be like, as soon as I scan a ship, if I know that they've got the module on them, I will destroy that ship as soon as I can. Out of principle. It's like, fucking, I'm not willing to deal with that sort of noise. If it's a module that improves their chances of overcoming QED through, you know, the skill that they have to employ in conjunction with the module, I'm a little bit more okay with that. Which is why, like, I kind of like with what Elite Dangerous did with their FSD interdiction. A flying skill countermeasure? Yeah, like Flying Wombat. Have you looked into Elite Dangerous's FSD interdiction game mechanics? I think that, like, that to me is, I think, what CIG should aim for. No? It's actually quite interesting. I'll see if I can find an example. Want snaring to be a more of an active process, making planets orbit around the star, or to make it more interesting? Yes. People say that it would be impossible to predict quantum travel paths, but I say that it actually makes it more predictable. Countermeasure for QED is blowing it up. Turrets and escorts are great for that. The thing about that is, though, Sorial, is that the countermeasure to stopping your QED from getting blown up is bring more firepower than the target can bear. And then just dumpster on them. Not would do that anyway, but yeah. Like, as much as we want to keep pushing that they should bring escorts and turret gunners, there does still need to be something to give them hope, even if it's just a false hope. It'd be extremely hard to predict player movements. How? It's the exact same methodology that you would use for snaring players now. Because planets orbit on predictable paths. The only difference between what we've got now and what we'd have with orbiting planets is that the calculations would need to change, and you'd need to take into account the movement of bodies in different locations along proposed routes. So the calculations would be a lot more complex, but it doesn't make it impossible. Like, if you want to sit there and say that it's extremely hard to predict player movements, then snaring is the exact same case right now. It's extremely hard to predict player movements now. Because you don't know for sure if a player is going to quantum travel, you know. SMO 18 is a good example of this. You don't know if they're going to go to New Babbage, Hurston, Orison, or ArcCorp. You have no idea if they're going to go to any of them. You have to make a guess. But the travel path that they're going to take whilst they're in quantum travel is always the same if they select the destination. So if the planet's orbiting, two planetary bodies orbiting at different points in space at the constant speeds, you should still be able to trace a path along a route where they're actually going to travel based on where they start and where they're going to. It'll just be curved. And that's something that a lot of people seem to think, is that it makes it almost impossible because, bodies are moving. Well, scientists are already doing it now when they're slingshotting satellites around moons and planets, and setting up trajectory paths so that whatever spacecraft they're sending out into space intercepts the pathway that they're going to. And that's how quantum travel would need to work if you were dealing with orbital bodies. You wouldn't be quantum traveling directly to the planet. You'd be quantum traveling to where it's going to be at the time that it would take for you to travel there. Yeah, sorry, I'm 100% with that, but right now it's nothing for them. And for a lot of them, they just give up. Players are giving up. As soon as they get interdicted and they realize that it's players, they're just giving up. We don't want them to do that. We want them to hold out hope. We want them at every single stage of a piracy encounter that they feel like they're going to be able to pull something out of their ass, even if they're not going to. We want them to think that. Alright. So, I'm going to share this video with you guys here. You would have to calculate your 20 kilometer, the orbit of the planet, your position, and updating your position. We don't even have instruments like scientists have to calculate those parts. It's maths. It's not about scientific instruments. It's just mathematics. That's it. And the 20 kilometer radius of the snare doesn't matter at that point. Like, if you can do the maths, you can literally put yourself at a point, and this is part of the problem that we got, is that we can't quantum travel to a specific point in space that we delegate ourselves. We're bound to, you know, like, going to known quantum travel points. We can't plot a point on the map. That's a huge problem. That would need to be implemented before we can even consider orbital mechanics for planets and that. But to sit there and say, like, you know, we don't have the same instruments as scientists, it's like, doesn't really matter because it's all mathematics. We just need to know the speed of movement of planet A and its rotation. Oh, sorry. Starting point, end point, where it's going to be at from where you're at to where it's going to, the speed between those 2 points and the distance that you're traveling, and then the time. That's just it. Like, to me, it's simple maths that we just need. And once we get that, like, working out the optimal distances for setting up a snare is trigonometry to cover as many quantum interdiction points from a single moon or planet. It's literally called, you know, trigonometry. It's just easier to, you know, just do what we call a leading snare. Too much for a video game? I think you're adding way too much. I think you're thinking of it as being way too complex than what it actually needs to be. Planet's already rotating on an axis. Then it just becomes the planet moving on an orbit along a known pathway. I don't see it as complex as what you're talking about, Mortals. We already have the mathematics of being able to do it. Hell, it's actually how they saved the Apollo 13 crew. They used mathematics to do it. They worked out the bloody slingshot path that they needed to be able to take so that they could actually save themselves. And they didn't have anywhere near as complex computers or powerful computers to work that one out. We're talking about maths, and when it comes down to it, numbers aren't going to lie. Have I played EVE Online? I've dabbled in it a bit. I didn't get too far into it. I was actually doing more research on EVE Online for the snares and traps and that. But the video that I wanted to share with you guys right now, and mainly for you, Flying Wombat, I want to show you guys what Elite Dangerous's FSD interdictions look like. So here's the video here. For Elite Dangerous, this is 10 months old, so it's actually quite recent. But this is actually a really good, succinct explanation of what FSD interdictions is.
The frameshift drive interdictor is an optional module that can be used to pull other ships from supercruise. Once a tether is established, a minigame between the attacker and the victim starts. The attacker has to keep the ship pointed towards the victim, while the victim has to align with an escape vector. On the sides of the HUD you will see two bars. These bars show you how close you are to either winning or losing the interdiction. If you are being interdicted and win the minigame, the interdiction is aborted. The attacker emergency drops and has to wait for the long FSD cooldown before they can get back into supercruise. If you lose, however, both you and the attacker get emergency dropped. From then on, it is you and the attacker in the same instance for the duration of the long FSD cooldown. There is, however, also another outcome. During the minigame, you can choose to give up and slow down. This is known as submitting to an interdiction. Against players, this is usually the best choice, as players are way more competent at interdictions than NPCs. Submitting to an interdiction results in a regular drop. This means you get the short cooldown instead, and can start leaving the instance after just 5 seconds, as opposed to 40 seconds from a long cooldown.
Now, I'm just going to pause here because he goes into the modules and all that, and what I wanted to talk about was when it came to, was it the minigame? Like, it's actually a really good explanation. This is a really good frame for it, actually. So, you know, the escape vector doesn't need to be exactly the same. That reward's not fighting it then. Kind of, it puts you in a position that if you're going to fight, like, if you feel comfortable enough fighting, you can just submit to the interdiction and then duke it out from there. Because, as Old Mate points out, if you both get pulled out of FSD and, you know, the attack is successful, you both get dropped out and you're both at a disadvantage. Whereas if you submit to it, the attacker, you know, like, gets dropped out, you drop out as well, but you recover faster. Which means, in this scenario, I guess this would be the difference between what a cargo hauler would do and what a criminal would do, based on if they were getting chased by a pirate or the criminal's getting chased by a bounty hunter. A player who's a criminal getting chased by a bounty hunter would be better off submitting to the interdiction and fighting back, because they've got a better chance. More than likely they're in a ship that's more combat capable and would fight back. Whereas a cargo hauler is obviously in a cargo ship, not as well equipped for flight combat, so they're going to want to try and escape the vector. So they would try and fight it more than what a criminal would, if that makes sense. But to me, it's about adding options, and I'm all about that when it comes to games. Like, add as many options as you can, which is why I like this, you know, idea. Now, obviously, this comes down to, you know, like, skill. Like, if you can keep the target within your FSD interdictor and you complete your bar, you affect them. Well, whereas if, you know, they're able to fill their bar up, they escape. Now, for Star Citizen, and the way that I foresee that it could work, instead of an escape vector, I'd say, you know, some sort of weakness, you know, like a weaker signal point for the QED. And if you start pushing into that, the Mantis pilot needs to, you know, reposition their ship so that they can enable a stronger point of their QED to, you know, keep you in dampener range. And it just becomes this whole, you know, flight movement system where the target is always trying to move to the position where your QED dampener is at its weakest point, and your QED ship is always trying to maneuver to counter that. Now, obviously, during this entire encounter, if it's a pirate group attacking a cargo hauler, the pirates are going to be there en masse and they're going to be shooting at the target. The cargo hauling ship should have some turret gunners and escorts firing back and, you know, going after the Mantis to harass it, increasing the opportunity for that for that target ship, the cargo ship, to get away. But on the other side, where QED is utilized by criminals, we're looking at a position where the bounty hunter may be on their own because fucking everybody wants to be Boba Fett, or, you know, in this case, in this day and age, the Mandalorian. So they're there by themselves in their Cutlass Blue. They're going up against a criminal who's also by themselves because they're going around memeing and, you know, just flying red. So it comes down to, you know, flight skill, trying to get away. Now, you know, the criminal could turn around and try and fight back, you know, and try and win the fight. But if they feel like they're, you know, outmatched over skill, this is literally going to be the time where they're going to need a mechanic that they can utilize to escape, or else, you know, people, you know, keep sitting there talking about how pirates have it over cargo haulers. Well, it's like, well, what about, you know, when bounty hunters start using QED as well over criminals? Because we're not always going to be able to fight back. See you, Silence. Yeah, the escort should be looking for the Mantis or the Cutlass Blue. That's the thing, is that there's a lot of things that players can do now to overcome QED. but there's not much that the pilot can do. Like, they're literally at the mercy of the entire encounter, which to me isn't a great way to put a player. Now, flight combat skills do mean if you develop them, you can improve your chances of overcoming QED, but it's still a passive effect. The Scorpius is a QED ship. We don't talk about that around here. The Mantis DS. Fucking... The Scorpius DS. Man. Don't get me started on that shit. But yeah, so we'll move into the next part of this video, which goes into a little bit more in depth about the modules and that.
Interdictors come in different ratings and sizes. The only difference between them is their capture range. The game indicates this range in seconds. This might seem odd at first, as we are talking about distances, but what this basically means is that you are in range of pulling the target if you could get to their position within the defined duration. For this measurement, the game looks at your current possible maximum speed, which is defined by your distance to nearby gravity wells. To be able to interdict someone, you need to be behind them. A stock interdictor has a facing angle of 50 degrees. With engineering, the angle can be increased to as far as 110 degrees, at the cost of a reduced capture range and higher power consumption. Alternatively, you can get a long-range interdictor, which will give you a longer capture range at the cost of a tighter facing angle. Note that you cannot pull a target if they are flying in orbital cruise around the planet. If the target flies into orbital cruise during the interdiction, the minigame gets aborted and both ships stay in supercruise, assuming they were not too quick when flying into orbital cruise. Also note that, for some reason, Frontier decided to give the Salt Kruger ships a hidden interdiction buff. This buff helps the Beluga, Orca and Dolphin to either escape or interdict another ship easier.
So there you have it. Elite Dangerous FSD Interdictor gameplay, which to me, like, I don't know if you guys have done it. I played a little bit of Elite Dangerous, and I got to do some of the interdiction gameplay. When I first encountered it, I had no idea what the fuck was going on. And then ended up fighting an NPC ship and destroyed it, and then just kept going on my way. But when I went and, started trying to do piracy, and I was doing it in solo mode against NPCs because I wanted to get it done as fast as possible to experience piracy in Elite Dangerous, I found it a lot more engaging than what we've got with the Mantis. So I'd hope that CIG, when it comes to QED and updating the game mechanics so that it's a bit more involved with what's going on, that isn't as dependent on a player being like a flight combat fucking ace, of having a small army with them to be able to fight back against pirates, or in the case of criminals, that they don't need their entire gang with them to escape a bounty hunter, especially if they find themselves in a position where they're overmatched, that they are able to engage in gameplay that allows them to be able to escape through utilizing skill and components.